Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners. Hey everybody, it must be time again for another Word Balloon Live, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. I am really happy to introduce Anthony Snyder to Word Balloon. Anthony, I told you as we've spoken on the phone, I was a big fan of your father's, and I love the fact that not only are you doing comic book memorabilia, but sports memorabilia too. Gives me a good opportunity to scratch both itches, as it were. Nice to talk to you today.
Yep, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. Should we use my Greek name during this broadcast?
Do it!
Adonis Sinadinos.
Very nice. Excellent. I'm not going to remember that. I'm Ioannis Suntris. So okay. There you go. There you go. How did Snyder... Did your dad pick Snyder?
Yeah. I think he said that uncle of his used Snyder, and he changed it to Snyder back in the day, like way back, like 30s.
Okay, wow. Damn. Yeah. That's amazing. What year was your dad born?
He would have been 102, I think, 1918.
Wow. That's amazing, man. That's fantastic. My dad was born in 27. And I had an older aunt who was born in 20. This would have been her 100th year. She made it to 98. So,
oh wow, yeah.
Yeah, good run. Absolutely.
My yaya was 103.
That's fantastic. Was she still in Greece or was she here?
No, she actually is not my dad's mom, but my dad's stepmother. Yeah, because my dad's mom died very young.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and then they moved back to Greece when she it's a terrible story, horrible story. But they moved back to Greece when she was killed, actually.
Wow.
And then he remarried, and a couple years later moved back to the States. So my dad, did live in Greece and was a Greek guy, very Greek guy.
That's outstanding, man. I mean, again, in our conversations, I'm like, I think our fathers would have been friends. Absolutely, man. So that's terrific. And my family did the same thing. My grandmother, it's a bizarre story. It's always worth telling. She got hit by a billboard that fell off a building. And they got this great lawyer, and they got an amazing settlement. So when the Depression hit, they went back to Greece for a couple of years and stayed with, my grandfather's mother. And so my dad, as a little toddler and stuff, was actually in Greece for a couple of years, and then they came back mid-30s. So, and my grandfather was totally fruit stand wagon guy, shoe shine guy, and then lucked out and bought a piece of land in the post-war 40s. And when my dad got out of the Army, he's like, I want to build a restaurant on the land. And the classic Greek story, man. They had a restaurant. It was a pizzeria in the 50s. And he had it for 25 years, and he ended up selling to one of the big pizza chains that are famous in Chicago. It's called Giordano's. And
I've eaten there, actually.
There you go, man. Yeah. So, and we knew Lou Malnati's a big pizza name in the world, and Lou was our neighbor, and he and my father had just independent restaurants and would, compare notes. They lived 4 blocks away from each other. So yeah, it was kind of crazy being Greek. I mean, he didn't really serve gyros until the 70s. Really, it was all pizza and Italian food. His partner was Italian, so yeah, it was kind of crazy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Now, how about your family?
Were you deep dish or regular?
No, we were thin. We were thin crust. We were old fashioned thin crust. Yeah, no, he never went to pan. He never went to pan or deep or stuffed. No. So yeah, it was pretty crazy. So what was your family's background?
My grandfather had a grocery in Steubenville, Ohio. And when the Depression was approaching, that's when they moved back. It was the same time frame. Yeah, man. And, my grandmother was that was the same time frame. Yeah.
Crazy. That's amazing, man. And if I haven't already said it, forgive me, everybody. Anthony's father, Jimmy the Greek Snyder, famous odds maker and truly the best known odds maker in the country, if not the world, in his prime. And my God, what would you say was your dad's prime, Anthony? When did it start?
Well, I mean, he moved out to Vegas very early on in the formative years of Vegas, because he was running his own book. He was a bookmaker, and in Ohio. And when he found out that it was legal in Vegas, he moved out there and got his own gaming license and opened a sports book out there. And that was, I believe, mid-50s, 1955.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Because I know my sister's 5 years older than me, and she was born there, and I was born there in Vegas. I was born in 64. She was born in 59. And we had an older brother who passed away from cystic fibrosis. I think he was born in Miami. Or Ohio.
Okay.
Not sure.
Yeah, it's funny, Anthony. I'm a 64 kid as well, and my sister was 1960, my older sister. So that's kind of crazy. Go ahead.
When he moved out there, and learned that gambling was legal in Nevada.
Yeah.
He went. He also had a profession of basically, he was very charismatic. When he walked into a room, you knew it. And he became Mr. Las Vegas out there because his office was at Caesar's Palace, and where he was the PR director, and he opened Caesar's Palace, as a PR director. And then he opened the Tropicana as the PR director. And I remember when I was a little kid, they were building the entertainment center at the Tropicana, and Sammy Davis Jr. was going to open it with his one-man show. What was it, Mr. Terrific or Mr. Wonderful or something like that. And I remember meeting him, and I was so young that we were about the same size.
Sure.
There he goes, "Hey man, we must have the same tailor." And that was hilarious. I'll never forget that as long as I live. And Dean Martin and they shot Cannonball Run 2 in Vegas, and my dad had a small part in that movie where he played the bookmaker. It was a big stretch for him.
That's outstanding, man. So how long were you down in Vegas growing up?
Well, yeah, from 64 to 77.
That's awesome. Yeah, man. So yeah, you were 13 or so when you left. God, that's outstanding, man. I can't imagine what it was like growing up, and especially with your dad working at the casinos and stuff. That must have been, seriously, that must have been like, I always say when I worked in sports radio, we met a lot of celebrities, and also at the same time, I was working at a rock and roll station. So between music acts and sports figures, it was like living in a Monkeys episode or a Love Boat episode. You never knew who was going to show up the next day, and it was fantastic.
Yeah, that's true. And my dad actually was probably the biggest celebrity in Vegas at the time, besides the acts at the hotels. I mean, he really was, Mr. Las Vegas at that time. He was, oh wow, that's really. I mean, I grew up, people hitting him up for his autograph all the time, and that's where he became. That's where he became Jimmy the Greek in the way, and was making the line. And when he started writing a sports column and, putting out that line to America, that's where he became odds maker to the country.
Absolutely.
And famous for that. And then when the NFL Today show happened, the first year it was just Brent, Phyllis, and Irv. And the second year they brought my dad on. So, and they were hiring guys back then, based on, he was a sports writer. He actually did have credibility as, writing the column. And it was in a few hundred newspapers. And, that's where he, was putting out the Las Vegas line to the nation. People were getting the line from his column. And that was important in the way that, people were being educated to the line from my dad's column and such. And then he would write about, he loved politics. He was a Republican consultant, maybe a bag man, maybe a Mr. Fixer, type guy. No, I'm serious. I'm
with you, man. No. You'll forgive me. I grew up in Chicago, so we know all about bagmen, and we all know about fixers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So no, I understand. And again, I mean, it is what it is. That's how shit got done, as you and I know.
Right. So there's an interesting story. If we're gonna keep talking about him, it's like, the movie Casino is based, in the Tangiers, but that was the Stardust. It was based about what was going on at the Stardust, and my dad was best friends with the guy who was running the skim at the Stardust.
Wow.
And, I don't even know if I should mention his name. But, no, not Pesci. No. He was.
Oh, wasn't Pesci's character?
He was a mobster. No.
No, okay. No, okay.
No, because Anthony, what was his name? Anthony Piscano or something like that? Yeah, that was a real dude, and he was really messing up Vegas at the time. That whole part where, he goes crazy and you're not supposed to shit where you eat and all that stuff, the mob, he broke all the rules, and then he got what, he got. And that was a true story. That was very factual about that. But the guy who actually ran the Stardust was a little Jewish accountant from Chicago. Now, why was a little Jewish accountant from Chicago running the Stardust? Because the accountants knew where all the money was from the Capone fortune. And that's what built that hotel and others, because that guy was making tens of millions of dollars, and they had to do something with that money, and they built Las Vegas with it.
Yep.
So he worked for those guys. My middle name is Clark, and it was Wilbur Clark's Desert Inn. He was my godfather. So my godfather actually was a godfather.
I'm hip. No, I'm hip. I went to the Desert Inn a couple times before they imploded it. And you mentioned the Chicago connection. Yeah, Joey Lombardo, one of the famous Chicago mobsters that only died in the last handful of years. I met him a couple times, and he's the guy that wouldn't rat at the end of the Casino when the two mobsters are buried in the cornfield, the two brothers. That's all real. And he wouldn't rat on either he did it or he knew who did it, but he went to jail for 17 years because he didn't rat. And when he came out in the late 90s, we met him because he was a big sports fan, and he would show up at we had a TV show at one of the casinos, one of the boat casinos here in the Chicagoland area, Hollywood Casino, and he was a big fan, and our host invited him to watch the TV show, and the casino owners were really beside themselves because they're like, he is not allowed to go on the boats. He is a former, felon. He goes, we cannot, and it's like, yeah, he's like, he could be in the restaurant and watch you do the show, but we're telling you. And the guy had literally this senior citizen bodyguard, Joey Lombardo, and the guy was like 5'8" and built like a linebacker, biggest shoulders I ever saw. He had false teeth, but you could tell he could crush your head with his hands. Nobody messed with him. I shook hands with Lombardo. He's like, hey, you and I could be brothers. We look very much alike. And I'm like, yes, sir. Nice to meet you. And the whole time in my head, I'm just screaming, ah! Like, just, okay, no, don't mess up. Don't mess up. But yeah, it was amazing. So, yeah, what can I say? It is what it is.
Well, another connection and story with that whole history of the mob in Vegas was that when John F. Kennedy was elected, and his dad made a deal, and he's made a deal for the Teamsters. That's kind of common knowledge.
Yes.
For the Teamster vote, and then his brother didn't keep the deal. And
that's right.
His brother came after, what he believed to be organized crime in America, and his dad had, Joseph had made a deal, and Robert didn't keep it, and there was a point where my dad was under surveillance, because they thought he was a big mobster, and when he wasn't, he was a PR guy. Like visible guys weren't the mobsters. He was like, he was out there doing it and, promoting legalized gambling. And he started the World Series of Poker with the Binions and hosted and shot the first time poker was on TV, because he felt like, this is a revenue stream that we should develop. And, he wanted to promote poker in the casinos, and that was an idea that was, 30 years ahead of its time. We didn't see a poker boom until the early 2000s.
Absolutely.
When my dad actually coined the phrase World Series of Poker and did it with the Binions, and you can YouTube it. I think it was 1973 World Series of Poker, and you see them buying in for $10,000 of black chips, and there was like 12 or 13 entrants, and it was a freeze out. They didn't call it a tournament yet. They called it a freeze out because the winner got everything. So Puggy Pearson, who won, got $130,000 because it was winner take all. So that was cool. But anyway, Going back to Robert Kennedy, like, he indicted my father.
Wow, I didn't know that. Holy shit.
Yeah, he indicted my dad on the same law about communicating gambling information across state lines that they were able to shut down the poker sites on the federal, the FBI. Now, so my dad got indicted, and he lost his gaming license, and because of that, because he pled guilty to a felony.
Wow.
He didn't do any jail time or anything like that, but that was the crossroads of his life, where he lost his livelihood with his own sports book, and that's where he started writing the column. And that shifted his life, to eventually becoming, super famous on TV, and Jimmy the Greek on TV. Whereas, he was offered the job that the Robert De Niro character took in Casino.
Wow.
Lefty Rosenthal, right?
Yeah, Arnold. Yeah.
What was the name? Arnold
I was gonna get him mixed up with the Black Sox gambler, but yeah, it was Lefty Rosenthal. You're right. You're right.
It's a Robert De Niro character.
Yeah.
So he takes that job as the entertainment director at the Tangiers, and that's what my dad was offered that job, but then to develop the sports book at the Stardust, but he did not take it because he did not want to work that closely with, the guys.
Boys. The boys. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that saved his life there too because
Wow.
He eventually went to prison, and that whole he did some jail time, and
Lefty did. Yeah.
And my dad became what he became, and they were really those guys that my dad left behind when we moved out of Vegas, were very very envious of his success because they didn't really respect his. I remember Lefty in an interview said, the Greek wasn't a winning player, because I don't know, I saw my dad go through a lot of money, a lot of money. But he was a gambler. Nick the Greek said the best thing about gambling is winning, and the second best thing is losing. It was just he was an action junkie.
Yeah, it's the rush. Norm Macdonald, the comedian, he's got a gambling issue and admits it, and it's like, no, it's the juice, it's the excitement. It absolutely is. And I mean, I've always been, when I go down to Vegas, I literally just hang out in the sports book. I'll bet a couple games. I really like the horses, but I've been able to control it because I never bet more than I can afford to lose. So I will always. I'm a $5 exacta bettor when it comes to horse racing, and I am very content to only bet on 1 or 2 games and sit very comfortably in a sports book and let a 9-inning baseball game unfurl or a basketball game or football. And boxing, I'm a big boxing guy. Bert Sugar used to get really angry at me because while I was writing for Boxing Illustrated, every now and then I'd lay down a bet. He's like, how can you do that? You're supposed to be impartial. And I'm like, I'm not covering the fight that I'm betting. I'm like, I'm okay. So, and I wouldn't do it that often. I only literally a handful of times in the 16 years I covered boxing. But yeah, man, I don't know. It's like, I get it. I mean, I would love going down. I would go down for a big fight and spend like 5 days, just in the atmosphere of Vegas. And it's a lot of fun. But again, I was always able to, I never bet the house, thank God. And I never lost the farm or anything like that. So I was able to curtail what could have been a bad addiction.
Yeah, well, I went back to playing poker during the poker boom.
Okay.
And, I tried to be a pro poker player at that time. Now, I would spend a lot of time in casinos, and I'd put in my play for my comps and stuff like that. But right now, it's like I'm still playing in like a Pot Lemon Omaha game until the shutdown. But that's a game. Honestly, it was like a $2,000 buy-in game. Okay, but I was only playing that once a week, and that was money that I could afford to lose the buy-in, or if I hit that big hand in that game, I'd come home with $5-6 grand. That was a fun game for me, and that was the level at which it was fun for me and a little exciting. Or we all have to have that level of where it's going to get us a rush. I know guys that I used to hang out with that have never changed, and they're driving Ubers and for a buy-in and running to the Commerce Casino, and or driving to Vegas with a buy-in. I got a buy-in. Let's go. It's really sad.
Yeah.
But there was a point. I actually won $100,000 tournament at Foxwoods.
Wow.
And I took that money and I went to Vegas with it for the World Series. I stayed a month and I came home broke.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
It's a true story. And my wife was pregnant with our 3rd child, and I'm like, I just took the worst beat after the worst beat after the worst beat. And, my higher power that I believe in and I talk to as much as I can told me, this isn't for you. And I stayed home. I stayed close to home, and I developed my business. Now I go through more money than my dad. He'd be very proud of me about the amount of money I go through in my business. Because he had $1 million job with CBS at the time, but really, that was his stake in with his gambling addiction.
Okay.
And he could have bought property in Vegas when the dirt lot next to Caesar's Palace became the Bellagio. You know what I'm saying?
I do.
He could have owned that property. And I remember my mom telling him, "Oh, you should buy property, buy property." And he had this sickness in his head that in a way that he couldn't be successful in a big way, because that would kill his action. That would kill the adrenaline. It's like,
I do.
He had horses and he loved that racetrack. I mean, I remember spending time with him. I spent the most time with my old man at the racetrack.
Okay.
At the racetrack, at Belmont, at Aqueduct, at Gulfstream, even the Meadowlands. We would go out to the racetrack and all day, and then go to the Meadowlands at night. And that was the first time I was ever in Jersey. And now my warehouse is near the Meadowlands, right, like 10 minutes away. It's by Giant Stadium. So.
That's amazing. So, all right, let's transition into your career. Obviously, you must have been a comic reader as a kid.
Oh yeah.
What were your books? What were your big books?
I loved comics as a kid. I was actually, looking back on it, I was very visually oriented. My career was in advertising in New York City as a photographer.
Oh wow!
So that was before I left. I left the restaurant business. I was actually in the restaurant business, like every Greek guy has to be.
It's
in
our
the
way.
80s. Yeah. I mean, if I would have stuck with the restaurant business, I was a very good cook. I became a chef. I was a chef for another Greek guy that I trained with and apprenticed with, and worked with guys from Johnson Wales and CIA and all that. And
wow.
I became a very good saucier chef, and then I was running a restaurant for this owner, and I was building a restaurant and had an investment plan and $1 million plan in the 80s, but I just couldn't see myself showing up in the same place every day like that. I ended up moving to New York and living out of a suitcase for about 2-3 years.
Wow.
And then I went to Europe and got involved with photography over there, and came back and sought after a career in advertising and photography in New York City. So then I met a certain guy, Mike Carbonaro, and
I know Mike Carbonaro.
Yeah, I got involved with. We became friends. I got involved with him, and I helped him at shows for the first time. And this is the early '90s. And I started reading books again because I had read books when I was in 6th and 7th grade. That was like the most important time for me. Those 20-cent Marvels, Cap in the 160s. Spider-Man in the 130s and 140s, Hulk in the 160s. So Trimpy Hulk, Sal Buscema, Captain America, Sal Buscema Defenders was big for me. I remember, going to the 7-Eleven and for the next installment of that Avengers Defenders crossover,
sure.
And that was huge for me. I remember getting an argument with the guy at the 7-Eleven because there was the stack of, the bound stack of books. They used to send them in a wire.
Yes.
Wire. And
like a stack, and you'd have to cut it.
You can open them, and it's I got to open them when I get to it. So I still remember that moment, and I remember the twirly racks, and I have a store where I have 5 or 6 twirly racks. I love the sound of twirly racks.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah, so the 20-cent Marvels. Those storylines still resonate with me. I still collect, like panel story pages from them.
Oh, that's awesome.
I probably have about a couple hundred pages that I remember from those storylines.
That's great.
Avengers Defenders, Early Defenders, Cap, and Spider-Man, Andrew Spider-Man.
Sure, Russ Andrew, my God, and Esposito. What a team.
Yeah.
What a team.
Yeah, I love those. So I have the love in my heart. And, when I moved back to New York in the early 90s with my fiance and my wife, that I got back into reading books and got back into, collecting and being part of the business. And I remember setting up at Mike Carbo's church show, the church basement show, with one table and one back rack. And we lived in a 5-story walk up, and I'd have to carry those comic boxes up and down and get in the cab and throw them all my whole inventory fit in the trunk of a cab. Now I have 15,000 square feet, 15 feet high, and 300,000 listings on eBay, and the website is the largest by volume on the web, so in the art site. So
Mark uses Anthony's comics art at least a dozen times in the last few years. Always a quality experience. So there you go. Nice testimonial from Mark. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that because, as I mentioned before, I was in the restaurant business, and that's where I learned my customer skills. Let's say, because you don't want that person coming in once. You want them coming in 10 times. In the year. Once a week maybe. So I am about making customers, giving quality experience. And I want to get a hat that says, making collectibles great again.
There you go. That's good, man. I like that phrase. I like that slogan better than the other one. That's all right. I like that. That's terrific, man.
Actually, my dad was friends with him, and I knew him. I was around him when I was a kid,
Wow.
My dad did the original promotions for Mr. Trump for the original Atlantic City properties.
Wow,
so,
amazing!
I was around him when I was a kid, and as a peer, son, he was always very nice to me.
Sure.
What I remember, and I remember another example of my dad's lack of business acumen as far as accumulating wealth. I remember Mr. Trump offered him a pre-build buy in Trump Towers, and it was only like $220,000. You got a 2-bedroom or something like that, and my dad didn't do it.
Yeah. No, I hear you, man. No, that's incredible, and even and then knowing Trump in the '80s and stuff like that, that's pretty amazing. I'm interested in how your business built, because your business built along the time of the speculation market at its height and obviously at its fall as well. So tell me your experience as an art dealer during that very volatile time of comic collecting and when things were really at their height.
I have very vivid memories of that because I actually reading the Infinity Crisis, was it? No, not Infinity.
Infinity War, the first one.
No, the Valiant.
I don't.
Story?
Unity? I can't remember what it was called.
Yeah, the Unity.
Was it okay?
Yeah, I remember reading those installments, and that was a big thing. And those Valiant Golds were big, and I would see them trading for $100 in 93. You'd get a Valiant Gold come out, and there'd be a bunch at Mike's show, and they'd be gone. $100. That was a lot of money. You get a good key for $100 back at that. I never really got involved with that stuff because what attracted me about the business was the stuff I loved. And I remember buying and selling artwork that I liked. That I would buy artwork that I liked, and if I bought a $100 page back then, which would be equivalent to like a $500 or $1,000 page now. If I chose to sell it, I'd be like, why aren't people buying this? I like this. But, there's no, you can't dictate people's tastes.
No.
So I was trying to sell things that I liked, but not necessarily other people liked. Even though it was Bronze Age material, I refused to buy 80s stuff. 80s was garbage. I didn't read that. I only want 70s. But anyway, tastes move along, and when I realized that I have to be willing to carry stuff that I don't necessarily like, but is merchandise and collectible to other people. That's where it became a real business to me, and I sought out deals that would build inventory and be merchandise to collectors in a broader range, and that's how I built the business. I built a business like that. Like today, I got in 3 He-Man pages. Now, to me, that's way after my childhood. That's but 80s stuff is hot. Those are $1,000 pages.
Wow.
Those are $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 pages, and it's like, wow, that stuff's really hot right now because, as the collector ages and gets into the more disposable income of his 30s and 40s, that's where prices rise for those collectibles in that era, that generation, And, we're the same age. And I remember when I was a kid, Big Little books and Disney books were, still hot and, still very collectible and valuable and, took a lot of shelf space, let's say, and and now they're nothing.
Right.
I can't sell Big Little. Well, I sell them for like $10.
I believe it. No, Jerry Conway and I were talking about old pulps, and Jerry's in his 70s, and it's the same thing. I mean, and was a massive pulp fan, and recognizes now that those that really do want pulps and stuff. No, the price is dramatically down because it just through generations. Yeah, they're not what they were.
A 7-year-old guy doesn't want to spend a lot of money on, but and most of them have everything they want. And who my best pulp customer is?
Tell me.
Jim Steranko.
I believe it exactly, and he's in his 80s.
Yeah, and he's been to my warehouse, and he has a checklist the size of a phone book.
Of what he's looking for.
Yeah, and what he needs is there's very few unchecked checklists in that phone book. He's been collecting pulps. He did fantastic pulp paintings of the Shadow and probably
the Avenger,
Spider. Yeah, the
Avenger.
Avenger.
Yeah.
He did amazing stuff like that. So he's the biggest pulp fan I know, and a great customer. He's a great guy, actually. I
like Jim a lot. Yeah.
Very easy to interact with. When he does, last time he came to the warehouse, his driver, Manny, drove him over, and Manny loves fanzines, and he's going to make a fanzine kind of compendium. What's that word?
Oh, wow, compendium. Yeah,
compendium, yeah.
Wow.
So Manny's a very bright guy. I did an interview with him for my YouTube channel the other day, and Jim was just great. And we sat down, and he found a couple things he liked, and I just traded him for signatures. It's a good.
Oh, that's a great idea. So he signed a bunch of issues that he did, and. Yeah, that's amazing. That's a great idea.
How many comic books did he actually do? Very few.
Bendis calls him the Orson Welles of comics in the same way that Welles only made like 10 or 15 movies. And yes, Steranko was the same way. Small body of work, but such an important creator, and what an impact. He teased me in terms of coming on my podcast for years, and finally last year at Terrificon in Connecticut, my buddy Mitch Halleck's show. I don't know if you know Mitch.
Oh, of course. I've been at every show Mitch has ever done.
Oh, I'm sorry we haven't met each other at those shows.
Yeah.
I've been helping him program those shows the last couple of years, and finally Jim was able to sit down with me and do a panel with me, and I'm like, thank God. All right, I'm like, if we never do another panel again, at least I got my one. And he's always sweet as hell to me. But he's a showman, and even he has that great poster that he sells, that black and white pen and ink poster of his character Chandler, and it's Chandler coming upon a murder scene, And he always, when he tries to sell the thing, has this great story that he tells. And he's like, there's really a whole story in this one image. And let me point out the various aspects and stuff. And he was starting to explain it to a customer, and I had my iPhone with me, and this is before we did our podcast. And I'm like, Jim, I would never record you without you knowing it. Do you mind if I record you telling this story? I go, even this much I would love to have on my podcast. And he puts his hand on my shoulder, and he's like, John, I appreciate you telling me before you started recording, and the answer is no. And,
he doesn't like
and I'm like, no problem, man.
He was receptive to doing a picture with me at my warehouse that I asked him to, and he was accommodated me with some pictures, that in my warehouse, and it's like, I know he doesn't doesn't dig it.
No, he doesn't like taking pictures. I know. But he's been, like I said, he was very kind to me and strung me along for about 14 years. And finally, last year, I finally got him. And I even told him, I'm like, finally. And he just had a big smile on his face. He goes, I wasn't going to lay you down, John. You waited long enough. And I'm like, all right, we're good. I'm like, I'm never going to bother you again, Jim. I'll say hello to you. But I'm not going to bug you to come on my podcast anymore. And he was great. He was terrific. No, I'm a big fan. Neil Adams, of course, very big ego.
You read my mind because I went to Neil's business in New York, and I said, we sat down to do an interview with Selling Heroes, my producers for my Selling Heroes, and I said, hey Neil, we sat down. I said, hey Neil, how you doing? And 3 hours later, my guy has to change all his batteries and his Neil's a great interview. I mean, he's a very articulate man, very smart.
Oh my
man.
God, yeah,
and a real, he's a job provider, and supports a lot of people with his business, and I respect him a lot.
And a great advocate.
Never mind being my favorite artist, and it was him and Steranko and John Buscema and Sal Buscema. Those were my, that was it. There was
I hear you, Anthony.
Guys, the impact guys, like, wow, I absolutely believe that, being into comics and reading comics, and I remember how I read comics. I don't even know how long I would, you're a writer more so. I would be like, I would go through the pictures and barely actually read them.
Really?
I'm just so visually oriented like that, the visual storytelling and the information that, of what each panel was providing, that sort of thing really cultivated my eye as a photographer, really.
I can appreciate that, absolutely. Isn't that interesting? Because I know talking to people like Gene Colan, they would look at film composition and the way that a movie scene would be laid out and composited in terms of fitting in the frame, and that was his inspiration of how he drew comics, and then it turns around and it helps you with your photography and stuff. I think that's very interesting.
Oh yeah, it was a big influence, and I believe that that was one of the reasons why I couldn't stay in the restaurant business. There was something else out there for me, and my higher power led me along a path that led me to this place as a family man. My wife and I have been together for 30 years now.
That's excellent. That's amazing.
And our oldest kid is 22 and 18 and 14. And, I have, depending upon the week, I guess, 12 to 15 employees. So,
wow.
I'm supporting, 20 plus people with the business. And it's all about, providing jobs and customer service and allowing these people to, make a living and support their loved ones. That's how I've evolved in this business. You might think, oh my God, he's the most materialistic guy. He's got a warehouse full of stuff. I have a warehouse full of stuff, but it's all about supporting my family and the people I've chosen to bring into my family.
That's great, man. No, that's fantastic. And also, again, you've explained, and I would think to be a successful vendor, you have to be dispassionate and kind of detach yourself from the work to be able to take it in when you buy it, and then also to resell it. I mean, so I think that's obviously an important thing, and you can't fall in love with your own collection too much, or else you're not going to make a profit at the end of the day.
Well, there's a tremendous story to that. Just what you're saying right there. I have a tremendous story because I was a passionate collector, and I didn't want to part with this stuff. And I had the Spidey 59 cover, and I had the X-Men 8 book, and I had a whole flat file full of Kirby art, and I had 100 covers that I loved. And this goes back to when Gil Kane walked up to me and says, "You want to buy some covers?" And they were $200.
Wow. Wow.
I had stuff that went all the way back then.
Sure.
But yeah, and I was a working photographer, and I was making a living. And we had just moved out to New Jersey when we had our first child, and my wife was pregnant with our second, and I had a job downtown across the street from the Twin Towers on September 11th.
Wow.
So I was downtown that day, and it was rough, and it was very traumatic, very not just I was an eyewitness. I saw some horrible stuff. But the miracle of that experience is that my wife actually got through to my cell phone at the time and said, come home. They think it might be chemical weapons. And I got out of there, and I didn't. And right when the first tower was coming down, and all I saw was this in my rearview mirror when I jumped in my van and drove back to New Jersey.
Wow.
But so that was a real demarcation for me because basically ended my photography career. I had, it just shut down the advertising business in New York. The whole digital transition was happening. And I was a film guy. I had apprenticed with a film photographer, and I was a craftsman with film, and the digital aesthetic was taking over. So 9/11 and the digital, revolution happening basically transitioned me into becoming a full-time collectibles dealer. So, and in that way, I had to, tear out my heart and sell the X-Men 8 book, break it up, because I needed to generate funds to build the business, and pay bills at the same time. So, it's a great regret that I have that I had to sell that stuff. But again, it was a process for me and my higher power working with me to be becoming the person I am today.
I understand. Absolutely, man. And I really get it. It's one of the reasons why I could never buy and sell because I understand, man. I want to keep my stuff, and especially at our age now, like you said, with a bit of discretionary income, you kind of want to buy back your old toys. And it's so weird during COVID. I don't know why, but all of a sudden, I think growing up with corgi cars and just loving those, and maybe your dad did the same thing when he'd come back from a trip. A lot of times, I'd get the Batmobile or the Black Beauty Green Hornet or the Chitty Chitty Bang Bang car and things. And those are too expensive to rebuy now. But what I have been buying are Hot Wheels, not even collectible Hot Wheels, but ones that represent either TV or movie vehicles.
Oh,
and I love it. And also those other, and again, as someone who sells collectibles, I'm glad I missed, I think, the height of that period, which might have been about 10 or 15 years ago. But those Johnny Lightning cars that are still out there, you get those for reasonable prices. And that's the thing, man. So yeah, that's that's kind of what I've been buying during COVID, is rebuying that stuff, and it's fun, and I'm glad I'm doing it. But and it's not, again, I'm not spending a ton of money, maybe $20 max for a car. And that's the thing, like, people noticed, my listeners and viewers, and they're like, oh, you're gonna buy the pink van, the most rarest of Hot Wheels? I'm like, not interested. No, I want the Blues Brothers car. I want the Smokey and the Bandit Trans Am and Jackie Gleason's police car. I want stuff like that. Those are the things I'm buying. So
yeah, that's cool. I think that was a common phenomenon with collectors everywhere. They wanted their meatloaf and mashed potatoes. They wanted their comfort food. They wanted, people everywhere wanted something that was going to make them feel better about life, and collectibles provides that.
Yeah.
So I am super blessed and super fortunate that I was able to weather the storm in my business, in the way that I lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenues from not being able to do shows. But mail order, has never been better. I probably had the best week of my mail order business life last week.
Wow.
But yeah, and during lockdown, it was, eBay was up 100%. 100%. So again, very blessed that I'm in this business. Not the restaurant business or not advertising that would have been shut down.
Yeah.
I was able to keep all my employees. Mr. Trump gave me my PPP. So I'm grateful for him on that program. I was able to get through this and get on the other side of it.
Good.
Where we're actually able to see people and buy and sell and trade. And there's small shows going on in New Jersey now where, I get my action. I mean, last weekend was supposed to be New York Comic Con.
Right.
Now, I have the biggest setup at New York Comic Con. I usually have 8 booths, sometimes 9 in the past. And I was supposed to have at least 7. 7. I was supposed to have Esad Rabik there, who's a A-list superstar artist that I represent. And we do a ton of business at New York Comic Con as far as commissions. I still have a commission list that I'm working on from the Ace Boston show that was canceled and Esad was supposed to be at.
Okay.
So, that was a tremendous loss in that respect with, New York Comic Con going down and San Diego going down.
Yeah.
And, I'm out the entire month of July. I do Comic Con across America. And we do pop-up shows across the country in Phoenix, Las Vegas, and then John Dalmayan's show in Los Angeles the Sunday before San Diego.
Okay.
And then we go through Houston and San Antonio and Dallas, and always do a lot of business in Dallas with the auction house there. And that was, I don't even want to talk numbers about what I lost as far as business, buying and selling on that trip too.
Sure.
But thank God, mail order is what it is, and we're busy, and we're out there every day trying to provide good customer service and make new customers, and keep the customers we do have.
That's awesome, and I know too, and one of the reasons why we've gotten to know each other in the last couple of weeks, you're going to be working with Baltimore Comic Con, and that Thursday before the online convention, we're going to have a night that Thursday, the 22nd, and we're going to do a video auction with your resources, correct?
Yeah, that's that. Yeah, we're looking to get the dealers from the show and the artists from the show to contribute stuff that we can sell for them for a percentage and generate some revenues for them, and the mainframe platform that is putting on Virtual Con.
Yeah.
Because it's hard for these virtual cons to actually make revenue. When you needed those people to walk through the door at $150 a head, and they're not. When you have 150,000 people that walk through the door at $150 a head, that's hard to make up for that lack of revenue. So we're going to try to put on a live auction and claim session with material from the dealers from Baltimore and myself. And if we don't get a lot of stuff from the dealers and the artists, I'm going to fill it up with my stuff, and we're going to have fun.
Man. Yeah, no, I'm excited, man, honestly. And it'll be broadcasting on this Word Balloon channel here as well as our various mainframe partners and everything. And no, honestly, I'm really glad we're doing this. And I will ask, because do you also deal with sports memorabilia?
Yeah, that's one of the things I did. I made a move. I made a couple moves during the lockdown. People would always ask me this. What do you have of your dad's?
There he is.
So yeah. So this was I took some of the best stuff, and I gave it to Heritage to sell in their platinum format.
Wow.
And this was Art Shell jersey that.
Wow.
My dad dug out of the hamper back in the day.
It's reflecting. It's shown him as wow. That's amazing. Jesus.
And some screen used
suits,
clothing, and suits, and hat that Richard Petty gave him, and
hilarious. Wow.
Yeah. So that went off in late August, and then there's another session that's coming up at their next platinum auction that has another batch of my dad's stuff that I'm selling. To try to make up for some of that revenue I lost with not being able to do shows.
Sure, man. Absolutely. Well, and that's another mainframe. We partner with Hero Initiative. And I mean, that charity certainly, I always point out every time I do a panel for either mainframe or whenever I'm doing something for Hero, that, yeah, man, 80% of their revenue comes from people at conventions, literally, dropping some folded money into the pitchers or whatever they have,
The pitchers, yeah.
Yeah, and I
mean, artists that the artists that don't charge for signings, they say just put something in the till for
Hero.
For Heroes. I've seen very full fish bowls for Jim Starlin, who doesn't need that money, and like JR, John Romita Jr. Has been a big contributor when he shows up at cons. George Perez,
absolutely,
been a big supporter. These are guys that I transact in their artwork on a daily basis. And they're just pillars of the business, and really appreciate their input for making it a little easier for guys that weren't so fortunate.
No, man, and that is really the beauty of Hero, that they're there for freelancers in their senior years, but even some younger creators having some hard luck. I know for a fact Mike Oming's wife, Taki Soma, has MS, and she needed some Hero help and everything, and they were able to help her. And Mike is another great artist that gives of his time, and will spend an hour or two at the Hero booth drawing for donations and doing quick sketches and stuff. And we're doing drink and draw during Mainframe on Friday night on the 23rd. And we got a great roster of amazing artists, from Ryan Stegman and Becky Cloonan to Terry Moore. And it's amazing. I don't have the rest of the list in my head, but we definitely have a lot of A-listers. And it's for the people that bought tickets and are donating to Hero, they're going to get a hell of some really nice sketches and stuff from a lot of top talent. So that's terrific too. Honestly, Anthony, it's great. Now, beyond your dad's personal collection, how deep, and I'll even say this is from a personal standpoint, I told you I used to write for Boxing Illustrated over the years, and I'm trying to recollect all of the magazines that had my articles and stuff. And it's
Boxing Weekly, was it? Weekly?
No, it was Boxing Illustrated. It was Bert Sugar's magazine after he left Ring Magazine, and it was
Ring Magazine. Yeah.
Well, there was Ring. Oh, I'm sure you do. But yeah, this was Boxing Illustrated was what it was called, and it ran like his version of it because there was an earlier version that dated back to the '60s when it was also boxing and wrestling coverage. But Bert's version was like 1988 or '89 through 1996, and then Herb Goldman took over, and I forget what he called it, but he changed the title of the magazine as well. But I wrote for him mostly from like 1991 till about 1994, and would do any of the big fights or even club fights that were happening, in the tri-state area of Illinois, Wisconsin, Indiana, occasionally Michigan, and I would go cover fights and stuff and send in the reports. So yeah, I'm just kind of slowly trying to collect all my stuff, and there's only like one or two left that I still have to find. But yeah, that's another thing I've been doing during COVID is scanning eBay for my old magazines, all my old articles and stuff.
Again, you want that comfort food. You want to like make yourself feel better on a daily basis. But my boxing was huge with my dad. He won an Emmy Award for best live coverage of a sporting event for the first Muhammad Ali Leon Spinks fight.
Wow.
And I actually gave that to Heritage. I think that's in their next session. The Emmy certificate.
Wow.
And, I'll never forget when I met Muhammad Ali when I was a little kid. We were in Vegas, and how old was I? He was champion in I must have been 10, so
sure.
Like 74. So the history, I mean, where does that place him? Where in 74?
Well, 74 is when he won the title back from Foreman.
Yeah,
that's when he won it back.
Title back, right? Now the first fight was in New York, right?
The first Spinks fight with Ali?
No, Foreman.
No, it was in Zaire.
Oh yeah.
They only fought the one time. Frazier fought 3 times. He fought Frazier 3 times.
So when, as a historian, when was he back in Vegas? When was Ali back in Vegas? Which fight was back in Vegas?
Well, he had several. I mean, I know he fought when he lost to Frazier, and they fought in '70. Then he went on his tour, his world tour, and like he fought Bob Foster, the light heavyweight champion. They fought in Vegas. I'm trying to,
I don't
early '70s.
Which fight it was? I was trying to get a range on which fight it was because we were at the event center where the ring was, but it wasn't the day of the fight. I think it was just like he was warming up or sparring or whatever. Not
sure.
Just kind of getting it. He was just doing some light work in the ring.
Sure.
And he knew my dad, and he knew what like he had his relationship with Howard Cosell, and he's like, "What's up, Greek? How are you?" He knew my dad was a voice, and he was covering the fight.
Sure.
Now what was the first? What year was Ali Spinks?
77 or 8, because the second fight was at the Superdome, and it was 78. So it might have been late. I'm trying to remember where the first fight was. It might have been. It might have been in Vegas. Might have very well been in Vegas.
I don't know. I think I was younger than that. He's like, and I remember my dad saying, "This is my son Anthony, Muhammad," and he goes, "Hey, little Greek, how are you?" It's like, So I'll just never forget that either. That's like,
oh my God,
Muhammad Ali speaking to me. But I was pretty young. I was, boxing was huge for my dad. He loved boxing, and he was very close with Howard, Mr. Cosell. I remember having Thanksgiving over their apartment when my dad was working, and how important Howard was to my dad. They were close friends.
I believe it, man. Well, yeah, and Monday Night Football. Howard was the king of that, and again, your dad was the king of Sundays. I mean, hey, man, my father and my uncles, we all would watch NFL Today, and they paid very close attention to your dad's segment about what he liked, who he liked, and who he didn't like, and stuff. And it was, and isn't it, man? Do you look at the way gambling is today?
Oh yeah.
And don't you think about what your dad would have thought about, like, where gambling is and now really is accepted as just part of the sports world, and by DraftKings and all these other online companies that have commercials right next to Campbell's Soup, for God's sake.
Who did a deal for DraftKings?
Who did?
Disney.
I didn't know that. They bought DraftKings?
I think it came. I don't know if the deal actually came through, but the word was that they were going to acquire DraftKings.
Holy shit.
They were going to buy DraftKings, and put it, integrated onto ABC and ESPN and all that. Make it it makes sense.
Of course it does.
If you own ABC and if you own ESPN, and it's all about, legalizing gaming now. Don't you want to have a dedicated platform by which to take that action?
100%, man.
My dad was actually the first guy on television to pick games. And he was coming from a position of credibility where he staked, hundreds and thousands of dollars. He was still betting on games back in the day. And you know what his favorite part of working for CBS was?
Tell me.
They were in the studio. They had piped in all the other games. So he got to watch all the other games at the same time. He had action on they had the NFC, right?
Yes, they had the NFC back then.
Yeah. So if they were doing the Giants in Dallas, and he had action on Pittsburgh because he was really good friends with the Rooneys too, and the DeBartolos, and a lot of money came from different directions with those families. So and that bought these teams. So,
sure.
Yeah.
No, and you're right. And back then, honestly, I really believe I got into broadcasting from that same excitement and connectivity that now we take for granted with the internet. The fact that really with satellite technology, the world is connected in ways that, again, was still cutting edge technology when you and I were growing up, even in the 70s and stuff. It was only about a decade old. And really, it was such an event of, well, now with the cooperation of Telstar, we're bringing you the Russian ballet live right now. And at the same time, they're watching a baseball game from Yankee Stadium. And that was amazing. So I can appreciate your father's excitement sitting surrounded by these monitors and catching all the action and stuff. And again, now we take it for granted. A sports bar, big deal. It's happening at Applebee's or one of those other joints. It's not a big deal. But no, I know what you mean.
The other FanDuel has a dedicated bar in the Meadowlands. They have a sports betting bar at the Meadowlands.
That's amazing. Doesn't surprise me.
That's where he would get his action in a lot of times. At the Meadowlands for the Trotters. I mean, that's how sick he was. He had to go and bet the Trotters at night. But
harness racing, yeah, man. I know. I always love Easy Money, that Rodney Dangerfield movie. And you got the one guy in the Trotters, he's putting the brakes on and slow. Hey, what the hell?
Yeah, the Trotters were notorious for their, predetermined outcomes, let's say.
That's a very nice way of saying it, Anthony. Absolutely. I understand. Absolutely. No, that's hilarious, man. And I still don't trust the Trotters, even though I'm sure it's much more legit now than it was. I'm like, yeah, that's all right. I stick to thoroughbreds. That's it. That's enough for me. So that's hilarious. Anthony, you're killing me. This is great. Well, I'm really excited for the auction that's going to happen a week from Thursday, the 22nd. And it'll be here on Word Balloon as well. And people are welcome to check it out. It's going to be amazing. And I'm really glad. And really, it's a pleasure to meet you. I hope you'll come back. We can have more conversations. Because,
sure. I love doing this. I love doing these. So it's like, I love telling these stories and getting it out there. I mean, I was speaking with a writer today that is very interested in redoing my father's biography and with me. And so we're possibly going to be working on that. And, I appreciate this technology because, there's guys that I want to interview, as simple as, tell me your favorite Jimmy the Greek story. Tell me your least favorite Jimmy the Greek story. Because everybody has them. Everybody has the good ones and the bad ones.
Absolutely, man.
He was very,
omnipresent.
Yeah,
He could, yeah.
Great range in his appeal and his unappealing behavior.
I understand.
When we did the 30 for 30,
I was going to ask. Go on. Yes.
Yeah. I worked for a month with them on that, and George Veras, who was the producer at the NFL Today show, he was one of the executive producers on that project, and Mike Pearl, who started out as one of my dad's assistants, okay, and then eventually became the head of Turner Sports. That's how far-reaching my dad's
influence.
Mike Pearl actually shot the first World Series of Poker in 1973, and then Mike Francesa started out as my dad's assistant and ghostwriter of his column.
Wow.
He was that was there's just some like the coaching tree in the NFL. You have like guys that work for my old man, and he helped start their careers. So I'm looking to do interviews with like Mike Francesa, and he was good friends with Bill Parcells, if he would get on with me, and guys like that, because so many guys are gone. It's really a shame. Yeah. Like as a sports writer, of Frank DeFord. Now Frank was very good friends with my father because they both had cystic fibrosis children.
Okay.
And my parents lost 3 kids to cystic fibrosis.
Wow.
And Frank had lost a daughter and wrote a book about it. And his son and me were about the same age, but they were really bonded with having CF children. But Frank, he was the editor at Sports Illustrated for how long, and the number one writer.
Yeah, and then even the National after that too.
National, right? He opened, when the sporting news was huge and sports information basis was in newspaper. He tried to get the National, which was a newspaper, a weekly.
Daily.
Okay.
And it came out. It came out right after USA Today really got up and running, and I forget which South American billionaire benefactor helped DeFord create it. But no, that's literally when I started working in sports radio. And yeah, man, we read the National every day, absolutely, and knew a lot of the
sports information and getting it out there to the public, like before the internet and before all the different platforms we have to disseminate all that information.
Absolutely,
they were trying to get it out there, and my dad was helped him with that, and he wrote amazing stories. Like he wrote the best profile ever done about my dad, I think, was done by Mr. DeFord for Sports Illustrated. And Mr. DeFord gave the eulogy at my dad's funeral.
Wow.
And he was a wonderful, wonderful orator, and talked about how, this man, squeezed the juice out of life, because he did. But on the other side, when we did the Paley Center premiere for the 30 for 30.
Yes.
And Phyllis George came and Irv Cross came.
Wow.
Yeah. And I said to Phyllis, and she met my wife, and they were just getting along so well. She loved my wife, and I told Phyllis, it's like, listen, Phyllis, I learned how not to treat women from my dad. Okay, and she was like, "Oh my God, I'm so glad to hear you say that. I feel better for Sharon now." I was like, that was a great moment I had with Phyllis. I'm so sorry to hear of her passing.
I felt the same way, man. I know it was a shock, and she wasn't a young woman, I know, but still, and really, my God, really, it was just I hate to be so base, but always was such a lovely woman. well into her final years, and it's
No, she looked amazing. She
yeah,
looked amazing when I
yeah.
saw her. Like what, 8 years ago when the 30 for 30 ran, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful woman. And,
Yeah, and really, honestly, she opened the door for all the great Robin Roberts and all the great Mary Carrillo and all the other great female sports broadcasters of today. I'm not even scratching the surface, but they all owe a debt to Phyllis because really she was such a pioneer.
well, my dad and took a lot. He had a business relationship with John Y. Brown, and he actually introduced them.
Oh wow!
And they got married, and she was the first lady of Kentucky, and they had at least 2 children together.
Pamela, her daughter Pamela is a CNN correspondent, and a good broadcast friend of mine is like, that's Phyllis George's
cool.
daughter, and I'm like, oh my god, and truly she's like one of the best CNN news reporters and stuff, and it's like, that's fantastic, man. So yeah, it's truly these generations, and like you said about all these different great sports figures that your father influenced that are still active today, and it is heartbreaking because a lot of his contemporaries, they have passed away. I mean, your dad's prime was 40 to 50 years ago, so I can appreciate that. Oh yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
So yeah, no man. Well, good. I'm glad.
He got fired on the first national celebration of Martin Luther King Day.
Yeah.
Where he kind of got ambushed by that guy, and he's asking a lot of leading questions, trying to trap him into something, and he did, but if 1,000 people have said you're Jimmy the Greek's son, wow, he got screwed.
Absolutely.
That's the next thing out of their mouth. I mean,
absolutely, Anthony. Yep. No, your dad was having dinner and having cocktails afterwards, and
he didn't drink much though.
Okay, because it seemed. Forgive me. It did. You tell me.
I was
yes.
there, actually.
Oh wow!
There.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jesus.
And I was there for the aftermath. And Jesse Jackson coming to the hotel and having that press conference, and don't prosecute this man. For history and all that stuff, whatever.
Wow.
But, my old man was just trying to quote something that he had read. It just didn't really come out well at all. And the very last thing he says to the guy on camera, I don't want you to use any of this. I don't like the way this went. I don't want you to use any of it.
And the son of a bitch did.
Oh, yeah, he did.
Yeah.
He did. Yeah.
Well, and again, this shows you, I mean, there really was this kind of trust between journalists and the people they covered that allowed them to still have a private life. And even if they, it's not speaking out of school. Johnny Carson in the 60s especially was a roaring drunk and publicly drunk a lot. And you didn't hear about it because the columnists would give them their privacy when they weren't on camera. And your dad was in this gotcha television moment, and again now everything is viral, and if you're not watching yourself, I always say, if you don't know the temperature of the room, it's your own fault for speaking out of school. And it's unfortunately that's where we are today with our society, and it's a shame because people should be allowed some amount of privacy, and also I said off the record. And some journalists, you can't trust them, even if you say it first. And unfortunately, they run with it if they think, they're going to be the next Woodward or Bernstein.
Yeah. So I guess I don't know if that made that guy's career. I don't even know his name. But,
I don't either, man.
I didn't.
And yet, your father is a fixture of history.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you mentioned the documentary because I do think it's a great portrait of your father. It is warts and all, but I think it does also show his the highlights of his life, and again the great impact that he had on sports.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He didn't. Well, I just want to make excuses for him right there, and I don't know if I should or not, but he wasn't. he just came from a different time about how people spoke, And when you made a living telling the world what you thought, that can be very intoxicating.
Of course.
That can really be.
Oh my God.
It can be. People thought. A lot of people have asked me, "Is like, was he drunk? Had he been drinking?"
Well, that's why I kind of assumed he was as well. Wow.
He didn't drink that much. No, he would have like a brandy and sip it. Or an ouzo, as a Greek guy. But he, his action and his addiction were, was in gambling and walking that line that eventually destroyed his career. But one of the key points with that and the way it happened is that, from my understanding, being around my dad, is that the NFL did not like the gambling element that Jimmy the Greek was providing on the premier telecast with the NFL's name on it.
Of course.
Because if you remember, it was the NFL today.
Absolutely.
Okay. So the NFL, this was a branded television show. It was the first pregame show. How is that possible, the first pregame show? Like, what? No. You used to, they used to go, it started at 1:05.
Right.
Because the TV would go.
For kickoff. Yeah.
It would pick up at 1 o'clock. And the guys would say, yeah, we're at Washington RFK Stadium here. And the Washington Redskins are playing the Dallas Cowboys, and here we go with the kickoff. That was it.
Yep.
So the NFL. So in that respect, CBS supposedly was looking for an excuse looking for an excuse.
Wow.
To fire him.
No, again, you're right. I mean, the NFL, and especially even then, the violence of the NFL was certainly part of the picture, so they did everything they can to clean their image and keep their image clean, and certainly gambling conflicted with that. And like you said too, CBS as well. So I mean, as much as gambling has always been part of sports, no, there was still a moral or not. Well, at least an attempt at morality, but also to placate those parts of the countries where they were offended by gambling, and they didn't want to piss off the audience because that's their customers. So again, you're preaching to the choir. I mean, I understood the appeal of the gambling culture, and again, and look where, as always, society becomes more and more liberal in its actions and stuff. And here we are now, where gambling is accepted.
It's pervasive. It's absolutely pervasive. I mean,
even rotisserie
fantasy football kind of broke the ice to it, as far
100%,
as the money involved, and like, you get in a $10 pool, a rotisserie.
Absolutely.
Right? What called rotisserie? Because they met at a chicken place.
Yes.
It was rotisserie baseball.
Right.
And, that was the history of it. The first fantasy guys. No, but then it's like, it's kind of like comics. You buy a $10 comic, then you buy a $50 comic, then you buy a $100 comic, then you buy now you're in a $1,000 buy-in pool, and the winner gets, 10, 12 grand. That it's pervasive, and
absolutely.
That kind of broke the ice to actually, now it's like, now you can go online on a platform and be betting if he makes that field goal. In-game betting. Field goal, the guy's, 70% from this. So it's, you're laying, the appropriate, they'll make the odds as it's going along, next pass, next. I know guys that have I know a guy that got destroyed. His life got destroyed from in-game gambling. It's like, you got to be careful. You got to be measured, like you said. Entertainment purposes only.
Live within your means.
I'm more of a sports guy than my dad ever was. My dad never played sports. I played football and basketball all the way into college. I was actually recruited by Steve Spurrier and Coach K. Because Yeah, I was living in Durham at the time, and I was a good athlete, and they saw my potential. I was a 180, 85-pound athlete. So I played receiver. I played slot. They didn't call it slot then. They called it flanker. I played slot, and I played free safety, and I was a shooting guard.
Wow.
And Steve Spurrier, that was his first job, was offensive coordinator at Duke. And then he became head coach at Duke. So I remember Steve coming to my house and saying, I believe Duke is the right place for Anthony. And then I had a meeting with Coach K, and this was 1982.
Wow.
I think he'd only been there a couple of years, and he wasn't, he didn't.
Right, he wasn't Coach K yet. Right.
No, he didn't become the all-time greatest basketball coach in the history of life, until much later. But that's a big regret of mine that I didn't, I wasn't a good enough student to actually get into Duke. Because Coach, I had a scholarship to Duke to play football, and University of Florida and Notre Dame.
Jesus, that's amazing.
As a football player, yeah.
Wow.
Those were my 3 visits. Those were my 3 official visits. A recruit can only make 3 official visits. And it was Duke, Notre Dame, and the University of Florida. And I remember having a meeting with Coach K, and him saying, "Oh, that's great. Come in with the football program, and you can play JV, and we'll see what happens." So I would have had a chance to play for old ball coach and Coach K if I would have had the grades and all the to get into Duke. Because back then you had to have the grades. You had to have the grades to get in. And I was just not a good student. I had childhood ADD and stuff like that.
I understand.
I channel well now. Because I'm a workaholic. So I work 24/7.
Hey man, well, again, I'm glad your business is doing well, and yeah, what an amazing life, and truly, I like I said, I was a fan of your dad's. I think it's a fascinating story. I'm glad that 30 for 30 exists, and I'm glad you're working with a writer to get the rest of the Greek story out there, man. I think that's excellent.
Yeah, we had a first meeting today, and we're talking about strategy, so we'll see about what we can do. There was talk about a movie getting made, but the deal didn't work out. They didn't want to give me anything. I wanted something.
Well, if you're able to do the book and the book does well, it can always come back around. And yeah, hey man, your dad, again, with where the gambling culture is today, your dad's an important story that needs to get out there and be told right. So I wish you all the luck with that. And then truly, hey man, come back on. We'll talk more. We'll talk more comics.
Yeah, you want to have a more focused conversation about the business, the business of comics and art. That's fine.
Sure.
And it's not even the culture of gambling. It's like our culture's view on gambling. It doesn't even have a view on gambling. It's like gambling is just pervasive in our culture now. And my dad is just rolling over in the mausoleum. It's like. What's that? What are those noises coming from that mausoleum in Steubenville? Oh my God!
You gotta when we're safe flying again. You got to come to Chicago, and I'll take you to a Greek town. I'll take you to a couple of good Greek joints, man.
Oh yeah. The last big show I was able to do was in Chicago. I'm sorry we didn't know each other.
Were you in C2E2?
Yeah, of course. I've been to everyone. I've been to every show that they've done in New York and Chicago.
Okay.
I was one of the original guys that was consulting with them about doing the show in New York back in the day. So the last big show I got to do was the Chicago C2E2 show.
Right.
And I had a great show.
Good.
Great. It was great. And then we came back and we're supposed to go to Boston and it shut down. But I actually talked to my rep at Reed that puts on, New York Comic Con and Emerald City and Chicago. And he told me that they're bouncing Chicago into December of next year.
Good to know.
Did you know that?
I did not know that. No, I haven't. I mean, and I got my guys that read that I talked to as well, and no, that didn't come up. That's amazing. It's smart because honestly, I think it's optimistic even to think December of 2021. I hope that's the case. I mean, again, until they can do testing, you can do at home, and you can really check yourself. That's going to be one major step. And then if they do manage to come up with the vaccine sooner than later, they will. I mean, I'm not a doom and gloom person. We will get back to normal. If we got through polio, if we got through any of these other terrible diseases, we'll get through COVID. We will eventually. Yeah, but nobody knows. Nobody knows.
Technology is I think they're trying to pace themselves and not lose money. And give the world and of science the first 6 months of next year to get it figured out, so that we can all come together again and be fans together and be just a group again.
Yes, agreed.
It's like I'm telling the local show guys, it's like don't just do one a month, do two a month, and don't just do two a year, do one every month. As far as art show, I'm trying to get another art show done before the end of the year in December with Joe Viteri.
Okay.
I'm trying to push him to doing another art show because the art show that we did last month, I had a great show.
That's great to hear.
Great. Amazing. Good. So, we need more smaller shows,
right?
So that people can come out, feel safe, and, there can be, some business done in public,
Yeah, and a sense of normalcy, which I know all of us, whether we're safety first people or the deniers that still don't believe in distancing and masks, everybody wants normalcy again. And I do believe that we'll get there. I mean, God, as we're recording today, unfortunately, Johnson & Johnson had to pull back on their research because they hit a stumbling block. And it's like, hey, let the scientists reach it safely, and then we'll get there. But we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. So like my motto my tagline that I sign out with is keep calm and keep collecting.
Very good.
So that's the perfect hour and a half here, and
there you go, man.
To everybody out there, keep calm and keep collecting.
That sounds great, Anthony. I really appreciate your time today. Thanks a lot for talking. We absolutely will do this again. I did too, man. All right, Kali Nikta.
Yeah, Kali Nikta. That's awesome.
Anthony Snyder, everybody, the Greek, son of the Greek. That was great. I love talking to him. That was fantastic. And I hope you enjoyed tonight's Word Balloon Live. Tomorrow, double feature. Afternoon, Dave Gibbons of Watchmen and so many other great comics over the years. And can't wait to talk to him. And then in the evening, at the same time that I was talking to Anthony, Walter and Wheezy Simonson are going to join me. And it's been a couple years since I've talked to Walter on the show. It's my first time talking to Louise. I am so honored that she agreed. And it's, again, to promote Baltimore Comic-Con. They both have panels that will be happening between the 23rd and the 25th. And I hope you'll join us. We'll have more guests on Word Balloon Live in the days and weeks ahead, accommodating and promoting Baltimore Comic-Con, just like Anthony. So thanks a lot for watching tonight. Until next time, stay safe, stay happy, and stay healthy.